order. And I know that people have a lot of paper in front of them. We can see the long lines waiting to pick it all up. And I just wanted to make sure, and we'll maybe repeat this a little later, but the green folders in which members have their materials are multi-bill folders. So we're going to take them three at a time, and we're going to go in order. So if you don't find it in the first folder, you know it's because it's not in the first three bills. And with that, is Representative Persell here? He's not here yet. Representative Anzelc, are you prepared to begin? Representative Anzelc, are you prepared to present House File 1382? Okay, and while you're getting up to the testifier table, we do have a quorum. And could I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 21st?
Madam Chair, I've read the minutes and they look correct. I'd like to move them.
Thank you so much. The minutes have been moved. Any corrections? Otherwise, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes are adopted. Welcome, Representative Anzelc. And would you like to overview your bill for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. House File 1382 is a very simple bill brought forward by municipalities in Minnesota, specifically, in my case, the city of Grand Rapids. I know of no opposition to this bill. What this bill does is it adds bituminous overlays to a list of municipal activities that are exempt from voter-approved referendums. The bill simply allows the elected mayor and city council to make these decisions when the city wishes to issue bonds to do this type of reconstruction. Okay. Essentially, that's the bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Anzelc, and perhaps you'd like to move the bill for possible consideration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House File 1382 be included for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill.
Thank you very much. And we do have one testifier who's told us she'd like to testify, and that's Rochelle Rustland. Is she here? Is there anyone else who would like to testify for or against House File 1382? Not seeing anyone. Any questions from members? And with that, Representative Anzelc renews his motion to recommend that House File 1382 be recommended to pass and be laid over for possible inclusion in the tax bill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. The motion is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Representative...
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Shouldn't the proper motion be to lay over for possible inclusion? You said recommended to pass. I think we just lay them over for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill.
I'd be glad to do, if that's the tradition. I haven't done this chairing the committee that much.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little sensitive about that whole thing.
Okay. Well, I always think, Representative Davids, that you have a very nice way of asking for people with concerns. And with that, Representative Persell, welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair?
Representative Davids?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that House File 1593 be before the committee.
Thank you. And for possible inclusion into the omnibus tax bill? So moved. Representative Persell, would you like to brief the committee on your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative David. Committee members. House File 1593, we're endeavoring to really put into statute what's being done for the most part already with regard to manufactured homes and park trailers, and that they're treated as they should be for purposes of taxation. And the bill's very brief. I'm not gonna read through it, but perhaps some more in-depth explanation from my testifiers here, if I may, Madam Chair.
You certainly may. Welcome to the committee, and please introduce yourself and state your name for the record.
My name is Mark Bruner. I'm with the Manufactured Modular Home Association of Minnesota, and what the bill does is clarify that a manufactured home that currently is what's considered to be an inventory in a manufactured home park or a sales center that is not occupied, not being rented, but listed for sale by a licensed dealer, can be claimed as inventory and is not subject to tax until it is sold. There have been some discrepancies in terms of how some counties have been interpreting the statute. It's actually clarifying an exemption that's in 160 Minnesota Chapter 168, and typically that's not an area of law that relates to assessments. So it just helps clarify that the manufactured home in the manufactured home park that's connected to utilities can remain in inventory of the dealer.
Thank you, Mr. Bruner. And we have Mr. Lund as well.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Scott Lund, Friendly Mayor, wearing a different hat today. I am also a licensed Minnesota dealer, and here in support of the clarification that I think that this House File 1593 would present more clear, not just to our industry, but foremost to the assessors and auditors of the state of Minnesota, because there is some differences of opinions out there, and they seem to be inconsistent from what has been past history for many, many years in this industry. I do not feel that it is at all a reduction of tax revenues in the fact that it hasn't been applied, and we're not segmenting or taking out or separating another class of manufactured homes. The intent was simply to I've heard from some of the counties that they feel that it is about sometimes these mobile homes may be rented and therefore they're not being applied as they're still being applied as dealer inventory. There has been a few cases that I have heard of over the time, but they're very small and not very often, and I suggest that I would ask that the counties look at those individual cases and correct those if they've been being misappropriated. It's very narrow in the fact that you have to be a licensed dealer anyway. So I think that this really clarifies what has been debated and discussed in the counties as of late.
Thank you. And Mr. Bruner.
I just wanted to make one additional point. We have talked to the county assessors, and they are not opposed to the bill and the clarification. We've agreed to work with them on some minor language changes to better clarify the language. And our intent is to do that going forward.
Thank you very much. And is there anyone else who would like to testify for or with concerns for House File 1593? Not seeing anyone, and not seeing anyone with questions.
Madam Chair?
Representative David.
I would just say I hope that when we mark up the omnibus tax bill, this will be included. This really helps clarify things for the county assessors and just cleans up some things that I think we need to clean up. So I thank Representative Persell for bringing House File 1382, and I'd renew my motion to be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus tax bill.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Oh. All right, we're laying it over for possible consideration.
Madam
Sorry.
Chair, could we vote on this? I want to win one. I've been.
You want to win one? For Representative Davids, we could do it, but we will lay it over for possible consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And do we have Representative Fritz here yet? Don't see her. Representative Schoen with House File 1341.
Pressure.
And for members who came in lately, the green folders are at a premium at this point in the session, so you'll find 3 bills per packet. So when you think you're done with a folder, if we haven't gotten through all 3 bills, you haven't. Welcome to the committee, and would you like to move your bill?
I would. I'd move
Representative Shaw?
House File 1341 be laid over for possible inclusion in the House omnibus tax bill.
Thank you, and would you like to describe the bill for us, please?
Madam Chair, members, this bill is related to medical device tax exemptions. The short version I'll give is that we have devices that sometimes are taxed and sometimes they're not, and we're going to try and clarify that. I'm going to let my testifiers go into their issue. Have at it.
Okay. Welcome to the committee, and please introduce yourself and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sarah Anderson from Key Medical Supply, and I also represent the Minnesota Association of Medical Equipment Services Suppliers. We thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk about the problem that we've been having for a number of years in our industry. Since Minnesota adopted the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement in 2005, we altered some historic exemptions that always existed for medical supplies and equipment. Prior to that adoption, Minnesota exempted sales to Medicare and Medicaid, and we also exempted product-based entity or product-based exemptions for durable medical and equipment and supplies, prosthetics and orthotics when they were used on individuals. With the adoption of SSUTA, the definitions changed. Durable medical equipment itself stayed tax exempt, but the accessories necessary to make it work became taxable if they were single patient use. Now, there aren't many items in healthcare that aren't designed for single patient use, and I think we all can agree we like it that way. The same thing happened with prosthetics and orthotic devices, and my colleague, Camille Zender from Pediatric Home Service, is going to demonstrate some of the items that became taxable. Hello.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Camille Zender. I represent Pediatric Home Service as well as the trade association that Sarah belongs to. So as example, this is an enteral feeding pump. This is a piece of durable medical equipment that is tax exempt under state law. This is a doll. This doll has a prosthetic device. This is a low-profile gastrostomy device that allows this pump to provide this baby with nutrition. However, you can see that there's a piece missing. This is the extension set that will go from the device to a bag to the doll. This is taxable. As you can see, this piece and this piece without this extension set do not provide this child with the nutrition that's necessary. We're asking that, as Sarah describes, that this single patient use device also be tax exempt. This is a prosthetic. This is a piece of durable medical equipment. This is the single patient use item that is not currently exempted under state law. As Cameo has pointed out, this is a pretty good illustration of the difficulty that we have. There are a number of challenges for us as merchants of and responsible parties for the state in attempting to collect this sales tax. We have made good faith efforts, and I believe there's a handout in your packets that show the efforts over the last number of years of our efforts to collect sales tax. The handout looks like this, and the graph on the front page of the handout shows the denials that we get when we bill for sales tax. All medical supply claims of this nature are governed by federal law, federal HIPAA law, and so we are regulated in how we can submit a claim, which codes we can use to group these products, and those codes are most often either not recognized by our insurance payers, they are denied as non-covered charges, they are denied as patient's responsibility, or they will actually suspend and kick our entire claim out of the processing system. So we have a challenge in being able to act as the collection agent for the state when we attempt to collect the sales tax. We also have a challenge because a lot of these items are kitted under federal, again, HIPAA language, HIPAA law. These codes are grouped together to include multiple devices. So in the case of many of these items, they are grouped together in the provision of service of the exempted prosthetic device. We can't separate out the single patient use durable medical item to charge sales tax on it. There are just a host of challenges that retailers or the durable medical equipment companies and suppliers face in implementing this regulation. So we are asking through our bill and through our testimony here today to return to the historic exemptions Minnesota has had I know many members of the committee, I recognize faces. You've heard us here before in years past, so many of you are familiar with the more detailed testimony we've given in years past. We're certainly open for questions if there are any from the committee, but we thank you for your time and ask for your consideration of our bill.
Thank you, and Representative Davids has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my question is for Ms. Dalton. I happen to think we should pass 1341. It's these folks are really in a box that they've been put in, that it's quite unfortunate. But my question, Ms. Dalton, is if House File 1341 was included in the tax bill and passed with the language as is, does that jeopardize the streamlined sales tax in any way, or would we still be in conformity?
Ms. Dalton.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Representative Davids, no, this would be allowed under streamlined sales tax.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify for or with concerns about this particular bill? No? Any other questions? Otherwise, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I just think I should just want to put in a word of support on this as well, and I am a co-author on this. I think I carried this in the last couple of years, because once you understand the particular sort of problem in this area, which I think the presenters did a really great job of explaining, and with your little visual aid there, it's very helpful. And we usually think of sales taxes as something that can be passed on to that the consumer is really paying them. In this particular case, the consumer is really not paying for them. And it just creates a very odd system that's hard to manage, and I don't know if we're going to be able to afford to do this year, but I certainly think it is something that we should do that would help simplify our system, just make it more understandable and manageable, and so just wanted to say that. Thank you for being here to present today, and thank you to Representative Schoen for carrying this.
Great. And Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like the record to reflect that I fully support my colleague, Chair Liebling, on her comments, and I think together, hopefully, we can get this done.
Thank you, Representative Schoen. Any wrap-up comments?
Madam Chair and members, I am really glad to be a part of bringing Representative Liebling and Representative Davids together. That was probably the crown jewel in my freshman year.
Representative Garofalo.
Well, there's just too much kumbaya for me in this moment. I have a question for the author of the bill. Representative Liebling brought up a good point. She said that she hoped that we could have the money to afford this bill, and I'm looking at the fiscal note in this bill. It looks like over the biennium, and I just want to make sure I'm reading this right, that would have a reduction in revenue to the state of roughly $2.4 million over the biennium. And the proposals we've seen from both the governor and the DFL legislature are to raise about $2 billion in taxes. How could we not possibly have the money to afford this very reasonable proposal?
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, you bring up a great point that we certainly have some other issues that we have to fix from the last couple of years that are going to be difficult for us to deal with, and I know that that's the
not a good answer.
Let's wait for Representative Davis to give me the wink here. But this maybe didn't make it through the smoking hot tax bill in the past. It certainly should have. This number, it goes back to 2009. That's why that number is so high to begin with, because I think it's retroactive. And then there going forward, it's $445 a year, roughly. And quite frankly, this is a tax that we're not truly sure that we're actually collecting. So we don't even know that we're bringing this money truthfully into the budget reserves, is my understanding.
Representative Groff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the author, I mean, my point, I was trying to help you make the case for this, is that certainly I have an opinion about $2 billion in tax increases on the hardworking taxpayers of the state. I'm against it. But certainly you would agree that if we're going to raise that much in taxes, then this should be one of the things that's funded in that bill. I mean, we're talking about going from $2 million within a $2 billion revenue increase package. I mean, this is something that should be funded, right?
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, I certainly put my name on this bill as chief author, and I would love to see it funded.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we will, any other concluding remarks? Otherwise, we will lay it over for possible consideration. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to testify. Representative Fritz, House File 1659. And while she's coming up, perhaps we could have a motion from maybe Representative Lilly. Would you mind moving House File 1659 to bring it in front of the committee?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee, Representative Fritz.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and members. I'm happy to be here, believe it or not. So I'm going This is a good bill. And I do have Susan here with me from the department to discuss the bill. This is a nursing home issue, and I think Representative Davids did carry this in the past, so he should be pretty familiar with it, and I thank him for his work on it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Susan Von Mosch from the Department of Revenue. This is a bill related to nonprofit nursing homes and boarding care homes, and it was considered last year, and it was in the tax bill last year that was not enacted, and it would provide a current exemption for taxes for these facilities. Right now, there is a potential conflict involved with the equalization rate requirements that nursing homes are required to follow, and with the North Star principles, which involve the charitable deductions or exemptions provided to these homes. And it does relate to an Under the Rainbow lawsuit in I believe it was 2007, and it was the following year, and I think that was 2008. There was an exemption put into the property tax provisions for nonprofits, but at the same time there was not a parallel exemption put in for sales tax exemptions, and this is what this bill does.
Thank you, Ms. Von Mosch.
Madam Chair.
Representative Davids.
Madam Chair, I promise to you and members I will not comment on every bill, but this one is a very, very good bill. And when we mark up the bill next week, I hope this is included. This is something that, and Ms. Von Mosch, you were awesome when you said it was put in the tax bill but not enacted. That was really kind. I mean, the governor vetoed it with a red pen is what he did, but I thank you for that. That was very kind, and this is a very good provision that was in the bill that I think we should all support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And is there anyone who would like to testify for or with concerns about this particular piece of legislation? Seeing none and seeing no other questions, any concluding remarks, Representative Fritz?
Well, thank you. This is a good bill, and I appreciate the time and consideration I'll give to it.
Thank you. And with that, we'll lay it over for possible conclusion in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
And Representative Savick, we have a House File 759. It will be an informational hearing only, members, because we do not have this bill in our possession, but we have agreed to give it a chance to be heard here, even though we don't have possession, so we won't make a motion on the bill.
Okay.
Welcome to the committee, Ms. Representative Savick.
And thank you, Madam Chair, for hearing this, and thank you for the committee. This is a very simple bill. It gives your volunteer first responders a $500 tax credit. And the reason I'm bringing this forward is that, especially in the rural areas, the population is aging. Many of the firefighters are close to retirement, and they can't find recruits to take their place. So it's a public safety issue plus a tax issue. And just a couple examples. In Freeborn County, they have, if somebody calls in one of the small communities for a fire, they activate 3 fire departments because that's the only way they can get enough firefighters to fight the fire. And in Faribault County last summer, we had a fire in Frost. There was not a firefighter in town, so they had to call Bryceland to come over and put out the fire. And it was lucky. It was just a garage. It wasn't a home with people in it, but it could have been a very bad situation. And this is going on a lot in the rural areas. The other thing is would cost us $9,500,000 a year. But if you think about how much it would cost us if we had to hire firefighters for all these rural communities, that would be close to, I don't know the exact number, but so I've asked Chief Perlman to help me out here today. He's done a survey of this, and he will be discussing the need. So, thank you.
Welcome to the committee, Chief, and is it Perlman?
Yes, ma'am. Ken Perlman.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, and please share with us your insights.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ken Perlman, Fire Chief for the City of Brooklyn Park, also representing the Minnesota State Fire Chiefs Association, the Minnesota State Fire Department Association. The author shared with you that it's a simple bill and has referred to some rural implications. I will tell you that although simple, this is a critical bill. Of the 20,000 firefighters that protect communities in Minnesota, over 18,000 of those are paid on call or volunteer firefighters. Many of those, because of the economic downturn over the last several years, are doing all they can to keep full-time jobs. And recruiting and retaining firefighters to protect our communities is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. 18,000 firefighters, if we had to convert those to paid firefighters in order to protect our community, would be almost $1 billion burden on the communities of this great state. And as a fire chief, I can tell you that we have very little to offer in exchange for someone agreeing to provide service to our community. Many of these volunteers earn very little in terms of an hourly wage, if anything at all. And in some parts of our state, the average firefighter, after contributing 20 years to their community, will have less than $15,000 in a retirement account, $740 a year in parts of our state. The fire chief has very little in their arsenal in terms of recruiting someone who's expected to maintain a very high level of certification, invest several hundred hours just to become a firefighter, and to continue to participate monthly in ongoing training, station duties, and other community events. The author talks about the implications in rural Minnesota, which is not an anomaly. This happens every day in rural Minnesota, but I will tell you that there are first-ring and second-ring suburbs of Minneapolis and St. Paul that also face this same problem. In a city the size of Brooklyn Park, it is virtually impossible for me to get firefighters during the day, Monday through Friday. This bill would have a significant impact on a fire chief's ability to recruit and retain firefighters, and it would be one of the few benefits that a volunteer firefighter gets. So we would certainly encourage the legislature to seriously consider this bill as a very important piece of legislation.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to testify for or with concerns on House File 759? If not, thank you so much for being here. Representative Savick, want to make any concluding comments?
I would say that this is a critical public safety issue, not only to the rural area, but to metropolitan areas. And like the chief said, if we have to hire people to take replace all these 18,000 volunteers, it's going to cost the state a lot more money than the $9 million that is estimated.
Thank you. And Representative Liebling has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Savick. I just wonder, why do this as a tax credit as opposed to going on the appropriation side and saying, you know, and I don't know what committee it would be in, public safety or committee or in that budget, to say we need to budget some money to, you know, give some kind of a bonus to these folks as opposed to doing it the tax credit route. And I know it's not a refundable credit, it's just against tax due. So right. For some people, maybe it won't be that meaningful. Anyway, I'm just wondering, why did you make that decision? Or maybe your testifier.
Representative Savick.
Because I never really knew that was available to do, but I can tell you right now that the public safety has got a very limited budget, and I don't think there would have been money in the budget to do this. And do you have anything else to say?
No, I don't. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I don't have a response as to which system would work better within the state, and particularly which one would be more beneficial or less beneficial to firefighters.
It just, Madam Chair.
Representative Liebling.
Yeah, thank you. I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench and all, and I totally appreciate what you're trying to do here. Okay. It just seems to me that sometimes people use the tax system, which is a lot less transparent to the public than just if we just said, well, here's something that's really important. We need to fund a signing bonus or, something to incentivize the continued service that you're talking about, but maybe in a more clean and upfront way. And I don't know the comparison of how much incentive you get from doing it as a credit versus doing it as an appropriation. But anyway, I just wanted to throw it out there, and maybe for the future you might want to think about doing it that way.
Representative Simonson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I just have a question about process. Do we know where this bill is and maybe where it's going? Or
Representative Simonson, it's in the Rules Committee. I suspect it because it missed a deadline, and so I think while we're having a hearing bills, we brought this before the committee so that it would have a chance to be considered and have the witnesses present, even though it needs to get through one more stop before it's in our possession.
It has passed through the Senate, and it's going to be on their omnibus bill, so it has passed in the Senate.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you would allow,
Chief Perlman.
Go back to the representative's question. There was a commission that was put together by former Governor Pawlenty several years ago to address this very issue of firefighter recruitment and retention. And this tax credit came out of that commission study as being one of the highest desired methods, both by firefighters who were involved in gathering that data as well as chiefs from around the state. I don't remember specifically if they were given an alternative. I do know that there's very little in the way of appropriations that are made for the fire service. Most of the investment made in the fire service in this state comes from various surcharges, either from the insurance money and what we call the fire safety account, or from the combination of insurance proceeds and city contributions to the Relief Association. So we've not been successful historically at getting appropriations for the fire service in Minnesota, and currently rank 45 out of the 50 states of the Union in fire service investment.
The other thing is appropriations. Sometimes people don't get the appropriations they should. And for the last 10 years, the appropriations for their retirement fund has really decreased. I have a friend named Brian Harrelson. He's been on the Keister Fire Department for almost 30 years, and he's going to retire. And his retirement fund is $11,500 is what he will get for serving 30 years as a firefighter and volunteering. And I don't think that's very. I think that's a shame, to be real honest with you.
Representative Anzelc.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's pretty obvious that we're going to learn from our experience here. If this should happen to become law, we'll learn if the credit does work. My suspicion, strong suspicion, is that depending upon a firefighter's personal income situation, and looking at what's happening in greater Minnesota in small rural departments, it just might work. But a lot of it depends on a person-to-person basis in their own unique financial situation at tax time. But it's definitely worth the effort, and I appreciate the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we will appreciate you coming and informing us about the bill, and we await its possession in our committee.
Okay. Could you tell me where else it has to go after this?
This would be the final disposition, okay, because it's dealing with the tax credit, but it has to be referred to us by the Rules Committee.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for hearing the bill.
Thank you. And Representative Erhardt. Next bill is 1101, House File 1101.
Madam Chair.
Representative David.
Technically, the next stop, if it was included in this bill, would be Ways and Means.
But
if it's in the omnibus bill.
Representative David's right, but the bill itself hasn't been referred to the tax committee yet. So it'll come to the tax committee, and then you're right, if it's included in the omnibus bill, it will then go to Ways and Means and then to the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Erhardt, why don't you review House File 1011 for us?
Madam Chair and members, I don't think there's
And
any
make the
motion
motion
necessary except for consideration.
Right. It's to move the bill for possible inclusion in the omnibus tax bill.
Don't move. Thank you. This 1101 is a bill that authorizes the Metropolitan Council to issue bonds in debt to fund its transit capital improvement plan. And for the intimate details of that, I have Mr. Shetman from the Metropolitan Council to describe what they want the money for.
Great.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Shetman.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Judd Shetman. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Metropolitan Council. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and appreciate Representative Erhardt for carrying this legislation for us. What you have before you is an annual request that the Metropolitan Council makes to the legislature, allowing us to have authorization for bonding related to small capital purchases for our transit system. We use these funds in order to replace fleet, also for small capital issues like shelter replacements. And the other thing is that these bonds, they are not just for the council, they are for all transit providers in the region, which includes Metro Mobility, all the opt-out providers, and all the dial-a-ride service as well. What the bill, or what these bonds, what we use them for, is also to leverage federal funds. For the most part, 80% of our fleet is replaced through federal funds, and we use this as the 20% match for those dollars. And if you have any questions, I can certainly stand for them, but it is a bill that we generally bring forward and is rolled into the public finance bill, and I'd appreciate the consideration of having it move forward that way again this year.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shetman. And are there any questions by members of the committee? Representative David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I recall correctly, isn't this usually, and I'm not saying good or bad on the bill, isn't this usually in the transportation finance bill?
Mr. Shetman.
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, the last 2 years it was rolled into the transportation finance bills, but prior to that, the previous 15 years or so, it was always done in the public finance article of the tax bill. The last 2 years were a little different scenario, and so we're back, and Representative Lincheski asked to have the bill come to taxes. In the Senate, these bonds will be rolled up into the Senate Transportation Finance Bill, and we'll let the legislature figure that out.
And I should note for members that this was referred to us, or it was originally referred to the Committee on Transportation Finance and then became part of our possession. Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering how, I guess that's above my pay grade, but how these things get merged together, because I think, we need to do some of these things, but it's just a matter of how that's going to match up with the Senate, but that's for another day. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Representative Jaskowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a similar question. I'm wondering about whether how germane this is to an omnibus tax bill. It seems to me that as we think about the single subject clause in the Constitution, it should be in a bonding bill, or maybe a public finance bill or a transportation finance bill, but not a tax omnibus bill. Madam Chair, it seems to me we may be in violation of the Constitution.
Madam Chair, I think
Representative Erhardt.
I think that the public finance bill comes out of this committee. If I'm correct there, that's why we're here.
Thank you with that, and perhaps Mr. Michaels could refresh people's understanding of the public finance bill that is under the jurisdiction of this committee.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, traditionally the legislature has passed a bill that's called the Public Finance Bill, which largely relates to the authority of local units of government, not state agencies, so entities like cities, counties, townships, and the Metropolitan Council to either invest their funds or to issue debt obligations to fund capital improvements or operations for them. And so, as Mr. Shetman indicated, in the past, for quite a number of years, this sort of annual provision was in that bill, but because the tax bill recently had been getting vetoed, I think the decision was made to move it into the transportation finance bill instead. And I think the history of the reason why a lot of these provisions got put into the tax bill was tax chairs back in the 1980s were concerned that a lot of these decisions by local units of government to issue debt created implicit property tax obligations that the tax committees wanted to control, so they wouldn't authorize, when they had levy limits on cities and counties, for example, and debt levies were outside of levy limits, that they didn't want them sort of authorizing lots of new debt that would allow them to raise property taxes in that guise rather than directly. And so that's the sort of the history, I think, of why it was in the tax bill. When I first started here, they were typically passed as local government bills, independent of either the tax bill or the transportation finance bill. So things have changed over the decades and how the legislature handles these provisions.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up, Representative Skowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, I'm not clear. Is this going to be rolled into the omnibus tax bill, or are we going to have a public finance bill that comes out separately?
Representative Drazkowski, it's going to be laid over for possible inclusion in whatever vehicle the chair and the committee decides best fits. I suspect, given what Mr. Michaels told us, it's the public finance bill is the more likely candidate.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone here to testify for or with concerns on this bill? If not, we'll lay it over for possible inclusion. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And Representative Erhardt, House File 745.
Madam Chair and members, House File 745 is a bill that authorizes cities to establish by ordinance, and I'm going to have an amendment, but I want the opening statement here first. To establish by ordinance street improvement district and impose fees on all parcels within the district for improvements and maintenance within the district. Now, just for precedent, there are stormwater districts that are run the same way, and there are sidewalk improvement districts that run the same way. So from that, I think I would like to add on the amendment next, and that is, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask if there was a handout to be done, and I don't know if that's here or not, but it lists
Representative Erhardt, we do have an A6 amendment, and we see a set of written testimony on the bill, but is that what you're referring to?
Madam Chair, there's a listing of the cities that support this.
It's coming around at this point, in addition to the list of written support.
So I would like to then present the amendment 745A6 for consideration. There is an oral amendment. We've been negotiating with various groups, and one of the groups wants to add a bit onto this amendment, so if we may call on Mr. Boyle for testifying on his oral amendment.
Please introduce yourself and give us the oral amendment that you and the chair would like to propose.
Madam Chair,
or you and the author, excuse me.
My name is Peter Coyle. I'm here today testifying on behalf of the Builders Association of Minnesota, as well as the Builders Association of the Twin Cities. And I would just ask, with the committee's indulgence, of course, that if you look at subdivision 9, there's an attempt there to create a carve-out for either undeveloped parcels or parcels which have not yet been sold and occupied with a structure. And the language that I'm going to offer has been accepted by the League of Minnesota Cities and by Representative Erhardt. So I would ask for your consideration of an oral amendment as follows. At line 3.16, if you strike the word previously, and on 3.17, if you strike the word unoccupied, and then insert on line 3.17 the phrase built and after the phrase "structure is," and then after the word "occupied," insert the phrase "pursuant to certificate of occupancy." And that last phrase was suggested by a representative of the City of Minnetonka. So that's the oral amendment, Madam Chair.
Is that to the amendment?
No, it's to the bill.
Okay, just to be very clear, Representative Erhardt, are you suggesting that this oral amendment be added to your A6 amendment?
To the A6 amendment, yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. And I'm just letting our counsel here review that. Okay, and does everyone feel that they have that and understand the intent? And then we will incorporate it into your original A6 amendment, and then we can act on the A6 amendment to get the bill in the shape that you prefer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Thank you. And any other comments? Otherwise, I have a long list of testifiers, Representative Erhardt.
Yes, Madam Chair, I have two people, I think it is, that would like to testify, or one, in favor of the amendment. I know not who, but wherever they are.
Welcome to the committee, and please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, good afternoon. My name is Jeannie Fox. I'm the Deputy Public Policy Director for the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. We had been opposing the bill as written. I appreciate the authors listening to the nonprofit sector and their concerns about the fee being essentially a property tax on otherwise exempt property. So I am testifying in support of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have a list of other testifiers. Do you have anyone else you would like to first bring up, Representative Erhardt? Otherwise, we'll just go in the order in which they were received.
Madam Chair, I think we're ready now to adopt this amendment as amended.
Mr. Erhardt, we did actually, Representative Erhardt, we did adopt the amendment.
You adopted the amendment?
As amended. Because we incorporated your oral amendment into the original A6.
And we actually adopted the amendment then?
Right.
I'll take your word for it. Thank you.
I'm willing to be corrected, but I believe staff is indicating we've crossed the T's and dotted the I's. Representative Jaskowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering, does this? It appears this gets rid of the Girl Scout cookie tax that appeared in the other committee. But what entities does this exemption for public charity entities include? Does it include churches? Does it, I'm not. Maybe staff can help us out.
Would council like to answer that question, please?
Madam Chair, Representative Driscowski, yes, this is institutions of purely public charity, and so it's in addition to churches, it's other nonprofit institutions that qualify. So it would be, I suppose, classic things would be museums, and in addition to churches and so forth. So, for example.
And Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I'd like to make a clarification. The amendment cites statute 27202. Let me back up briefly. Article 10 on taxation in the state constitution does exempt public universities, institutions, churches, etc. But subdivision 7 is specific only to the term that is also used in the Constitution, institutions of purely public charity. And that term was not defined in statute until 2009, with about 2 years of work led mostly by Representative Marquardt and some of your other colleagues in conjunction with the Council of Nonprofits, the Department of Revenue, and the County Assessors Association. So it is somewhat a narrow slice, subdivision 7. Subdivision 2 is public burying grounds, 3 is public schoolhouses, 4 is public hospitals, 5 education institutions, 6 church property. This amendment addresses only subdivision 7.
Any further questions or comments on that? Representative Davney was first.
Thank you, and a question for Mr. Michael. Would the language in the amendment that we're focused on now exempt the Mayo Clinic from paying street assessment fees in Rochester?
Mr. Michaels?
Madam Chair, Representative Dabney, I don't honestly one would have to look at whether or not the entity qualifies, and I would perhaps need to disagree a little bit with the analysis that the witness presented. She's correct in that the statute, if you look at the structure of the statute, there are exemptions for other types of entities. There are some entities that could qualify under multiple exemptions, that they very well may be an institution of purely public charity in addition to being a school or some other institution. There is a separate exemption for hospitals, but I think traditionally hospitals probably could, for example, qualify as an institution of purely public charity if you look at the statutory provision. Now, the assessor never needs to get to that question. To qualify as an institution of purely public charity, you have to meet what's called the North Star test, and that's a challenging test to meet. And if you qualify under one of those other items, which is just based on your status, it's very easy to do. But if push came to shove and someone were to litigate over this, another entity that qualifies under one of those other exemptions that the witness listed very well be able to say, look, we meet all of the requirements that are in Subdivision 7, and therefore we are exempt as an institution of purely public charity. So that's the only little addendum that I would add to what the witness indicated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Thank you. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Michael, given that, I mean, really the onus would be on the church or the school or the other entity to litigate if the assessor didn't provide them the exemption in that situation. Is that how this would play out?
Mr. Michaels.
Madam Chair, Representative Drazkowski, it's not clear to me with regard to this how much the assessor would actually get into administering this as opposed to the city that's imposing it. And you know, but yes, essentially there could be with language like this a live issue as to an entity that has gotten their normal property tax exemption under one of those other statuses, but believes that based on the nature of their operations, that they actually, one of the things that was added as a result of Under the Rainbow is you have to be a 501c3, and that may screen out some of those entities, but a lot of the entities are 501c3s and can meet the other elements of the North Star test. So, for example, a church is a 501c3, and it very well may be that they meet all of those requirements. Many of these charities have the difficulty that they have with becoming an institution of purely public charity is they have a difficulty meeting the donation requirement. Because, for example, like with entities that rely heavily on charging fees for the service they provide and don't get much in the way of donations, one of the elements of the North Star test that screens out a lot of entities is that you have to receive donations. And churches obviously don't have a problem with that because they largely live on donations. And so that's not going to screen them out. There may be something else that would, but it's not coming to mind immediately.
So, Madam Chair, thank you, Mr. Michael. So I guess the problem that I'm seeing here is that the onus would be on the organization to appeal or to challenge the city about their ability to be exempt under those. I'm wondering if Representative Erhardt is interested in rewriting that or writing it more broadly so that we make certain we capture those other organizations. I don't know. It seems to really not work the way it is, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to begin with the testifiers. Oh, excuse me, Representative Anderson.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm happy to wait until after the testifiers. I just want to make sure that there's an opportunity given to ask questions after that point.
So we've got you on the list.
Great, thank you.
Great. And the first name I have is Jacob Milner. And after that, just to line people up, we have Ethan Roberts and Kate Johansson, and then Kay Rocco. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Jacob Milner, and I'm here representing the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association. We're here to speak in opposition to House File 745. You should all have a handout with you with about 30 organizations, ranging from nonprofits to faith organizations to businesses and business associations opposed to this bill for several reasons. Our first concern is, and I'll let my other colleagues get into more detail about the more specific concerns, but our first concern is that this bill gives broad authority to the municipalities to increase taxes for these projects. We believe that there already exist several taxing mechanisms available at the municipal level that allow cities to raise revenue to pay for transportation projects and maintenance. Under this proposal, as written, there is no need for a city to prove benefit to any affected property to justify imposing this fee. It only says that the fee will be benefit to the district. So it's conceivable that your property, which was located within the taxing district, will be paying the fees here, but not be located near the actual road improvement, so you won't be getting any direct benefit from this. Nonetheless, the city can still impose these fees impose this tax on your property to finance this. Additionally, cities under this legislation are free to draw the taxing districts in any shape and size, which would allow them to impose fees on certain properties. Nothing would prohibit a city from imposing the fees in such a way that could minimally, for example, affect voting homeowners and instead burden commercial property owners who oftentimes do not live or vote in the same community as their businesses are located. This is unfair, and there's seemingly no limit on how the city can devise its fee system with this legislation. Furthermore, the fees are authorized for up to 20 years and are not sunset after a particular project has been completed, and they can be seemingly reimposed after another 20-year period, and we feel that this is very long, too long. And finally, again, property owners are already paying for street improvements through property taxes and other taxing mechanisms. We are paying right now for road maintenance and that sort of thing. And so for those reasons, we encourage you to reject this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Roberts. And after Mr. Roberts will be Kate Johansson.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Ethan Roberts. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas. I'm in a somewhat awkward position of neither opposing or supporting the bill and neither necessarily opposing or supporting the amendment, and let me explain. At the Jewish Community Relations Council, my position is to represent the interests of multiple 501c3 nonprofits. It's everything from community centers, which stand in the same shoes as the YMCAs or the YWCAs, but it also extends to nursing homes. And so looking specifically at this amendment, which deals only specifically subdivision 7, I think it's a good amendment as far as it goes. And so I really applaud the work of my colleagues at the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits who've been involved in this process throughout the whole time. And it will be a helpful amendment for several of the agencies which I represent and for many nonprofits in Minnesota. However, when I look to the nursing home, it doesn't help. It's true that I suppose... I mean, actually, I'm not going to say that. I actually think it does not help. There is a subdivision 90 within that same statute, which was created expressly because we believe that subdivision 7 wouldn't work for nursing homes. So moving forward, I think there's work to be done if this committee, if this legislature doesn't want to include nursing homes. It's interesting. A lot of us lobbyists, we don't really pay attention sometimes when other bills are heard, but sometimes you hear something that you really should pay attention to. Patty Fritz's bill was a good example of that. So you've already heard about rate equalization, and you've already heard about the special situation that nursing homes are in. That's the exact same situation here. It's why we don't hit subdivision 7. It's, you set our rates, and we don't meet that. And it's true that there's a lot of money that comes in through nursing homes. It's also true that our expenses are greater than the money that comes into nursing homes, and we've tried our best to make it up with charitable giving. But we would be taxed under this, or feed, I guess, under this provision. So it's a good amendment. I certainly don't stand in opposition to it. But I think the committee should know that if you want to cover nursing homes and other entities out there, that there's more work to be done. I'd stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Ms. Johansson. And then after that, we'll have Kay Rocco and Amber Bacchus. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Kate Johansson. I represent the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and its 2,400 employer members, 80% of which are small businesses. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on House File 745. The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce opposes this legislation for a few simple reasons. And out of respect for the committee's time, because I know there are several testifiers, I'll focus on distilling those reasons into a few broad themes that I believe other testifiers will build on per their particular interests. The few themes that I'd like to discuss are as follows. First, this is a very broad bill. It grants wide authority to municipalities to draw taxing districts and structure rates without much guidance or parameters around them. And the result of that is concerning because it could lead to a very disproportionate burden on some residents and businesses to finance improvements that everybody or more than is being a broader audience than is paying for an improvement is benefiting from. Second, we think that's poor public policy. As indicated, there is no requirement in this bill that those who are paying for street improvements are the ones paying for it. That really does deviate from traditional transportation policy. Similar mechanisms generally require a nexus between use and benefit or finance, and certainly that's a concern that we should be looking at when adopting this type of legislation. The third concern that I would raise is timing. The bill contemplates a 20-year sunset, but certainly in this instance, a certain project might be the catalyst for imposing this type of fee, but wouldn't necessarily be the conclusion. The revenue stream could far outlast the need that was provided to the public as the reason for imposing the revenue-raising mechanism. And fourth, we think that this is a duplicative measure. There are other mechanisms in place, which I believe have been provided to you on a one-pager, along with the list of 30 organizations that have concerns with or oppose the bill. And I think the appropriate solution would be to refine those mechanisms. Right now, Minnesota has one of the most complex property tax systems in the country, if not the most, and simplification would perhaps be a better way to go about refining the system rather than adding a new source of property tax that has the problems as indicated above. I know that you've received a list of cities that support this, but I would add one note that some cities have recognized the concerns that I've articulated previously. Just last night, the Monticello Council said that they were very concerned about the proposal and did unanimously pass a motion denying support of a resolution in favor of this mechanism, and also requested their local chamber write a letter of concern to the League of Minnesota Cities, which has been the primary advocate for the legislation in the past. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Let me remind, Madam Chair, that this is not an obligation of every city to do this. It has it's at the discretion of the city, as a matter of fact. And so whoever wants to object to it doesn't have to do it. No matter that, it just is the city must propose and adopt it. And it is only given to them as a tool in their toolbox if they should so desire. And they do the normal proceedings of announcing, taking testimony, and so forth, like you would do in any other assessment proceedings. So a lot of this is just scare them out, and a bunch of it is nonsense, but that's all right. We got to have a little nonsense here, or it wouldn't be any fun.
Representative Garofalo, a minor comment, but we're really going to try and get through the testimony before we get done with our hearing time, and I have a long list here, so if it's just a brief question, we'll take it.
Madam Chair, it's for the author of the bill. Just given his testimony here in the harem and scare him, so given that logic, Representative Erhardt, what limitations on local government would you support? Why not just let Minneapolis and St. Paul have a local option income tax? That seems like a reasonable proposition.
They already have it. What do you think about that?
A local, Madam Chair, Representative Erhardt.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I think that they already. Well, maybe it was imposed. It wasn't by. But somebody is paying for a few of those things when you go out to dinner in the city of Minneapolis, and it ain't the state that's doing it all.
Madam Chair, Representative Erhardt. I said a local.
Representative Erhardt, he was referring to a local option income tax.
Oh, income tax.
So, I mean, what limitations on local, given that logic, I mean, shouldn't there be some limitations on municipalities to tax the snot out of the private sector? Is there, I mean, what taxation or what policy should municipalities not be able to engage in?
Well, Madam Chair, they already have...
Representative Garofalo, I think we're going to hold this discussion until after we hear from the testifiers.
I would like to hear from the author of the bill.
And you'll be able to do that at that point. But I thought you just wanted to follow up on his clarifying remarks, and we have Representative Anderson ahead of you in the post-discussion from the testimony. But I think we're going to get through the testifiers first, because we do have a long list, and we want to make sure we get to them before we break.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you very much. And Ms. Rico, and then we'll have Amber Bacchus and Mike Hickey.
Jim.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kay Rocco, and I am the Director of Public Policy for NIOP, representing commercial real estate developers, owners, and managers of commercial real estate, along with the thousands of tenants that are in the buildings our members own and manage. You know, it strikes me that when I listen to this bill or read the bill, that everybody talks about how complicated our property tax system is, and that how we should work to simplify it, but yet giving local jurisdictions yet another way to tax property, especially outside of the normal process we are all accustomed to, just makes it more complicated. And this is the type of thing that frustrates taxpayers. In addition, it's really hard to reconcile the pressure around here to provide property tax relief, but yet give greater authority to take more money from those same properties and not call it a property tax, but call it a fee. It would seem that local jurisdictions already have the authority to lay down a design for street maintenance, go to the taxpayers, make their case, and they have the authority to levy a property tax to pay for those street maintenance fees. And I just question, why do we need yet another authority to tax property, especially out of the normal process, and also in light of the fact that we're working hard to try to provide property tax relief? Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. Ms. Bachhaus?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Amber Bacchus. I'm with the firm of Leonard Street & Deinert, and here on behalf of the Minnesota Trucking Association, a statewide trade association representing 720 member companies, many of whom are small businesses and operate on extremely tight profit margins. The Trucking Association does support a healthy transportation infrastructure, but we don't believe this is the way to fund it. While trucking is critical to the economy, it's rare that municipalities are wooing trucking terminals to come to their communities. In fact, we've seen the opposite over the years, as oftentimes cities and developers are looking for a higher and better use of that land. We are concerned with this bill because there are no limits to the fees, that there could be arbitrary and steep fees levied against trucking companies. These, if they're in a city that chose to implement the street improvement district, could put them at a competitive disadvantage over their competitors who might not have this fee charged against them. We believe that if transportation funding is a priority for these municipalities, they should make it a part of their budget and go through the normal budget process, have it as part of their property tax increase, and have the truth in taxation hearings where there is a more transparent and accountable way for folks to know about these fees and what they're being used for. So with that, I'll conclude my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bacchus. And Mike Hickey is next, followed by Scott McMahon and Lee Gustafson.
Madam Chair, members, Mike Hickey with the National Federation of Independent Business. I just wanted to make a few brief comments and hopefully not be too overly repetitive. There's quite a list of opponents here. We're the largest business group in terms of entities, as many of you know, with 13,000 members, and the largest or premier small business group in the state. The vast majority of our members do own property, and we're very concerned about the consequences of this bill. I think the biggest point we need to look at is just how much of a departure from the current law this is. Currently, you have to benefit from the improvement, and sometimes on a quiet street like the one I live on, where assessment is occurring right now, it might just be the people on that street. A busier street or a highway would expand beyond it, but you have to benefit from it, and that's the big change here. People, we're afraid, are going to end up paying for this who may not benefit from it at all. And that is the biggest change and a big departure, and you really need to keep your eye on that. Second, we're really concerned about the wide open nature of it, as other witnesses have talked about. What would the rate be on commercial property? Would everybody pay the same rate, or are we going to take the same class structure we see in our property tax system, which has caused quite a problem for our state in terms of competitiveness, and we're going to put that in this proposal so that a business that may benefit very little from this may pay a lot versus what the average homeowner would pay, and so that's very concerning. Also, how the districts would be configured, the wide open nature of this and the amount of discretion being left is very concerning. Third, this really looks like a third way to tax commercial property in this state. We've made some progress on that issue, but we're still high on critical rankings. I think most of you know that. This could be a third way to really tax commercial property and cause that problem, to make that problem worse. And finally, the fees don't end when the project's done, as you've heard. And 20 years is very concerning that something would be that open-ended. And this is a solution that we think is going to cause more problems than it's going to solve, and urge you to oppose it.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey. And Scott McMahon?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Scott McMahon, and I'm here on behalf of the 17 nonprofit liberal arts colleges that are members of the Minnesota Private College Council. We represent schools like Hamline University, Augsburg College, Gustavus Adolphus College, the College of St. Scholastica, the College of St. Benedict. Our member institutions are granted their tax-exempt status under Article 10, Section 1 of the state's Constitution, where academies, colleges, and universities are specifically identified as exempt from taxation. Article 10, Section 1 also states the legislature may authorize municipal corporations to levy and collect assessments for local improvements upon property benefited, thereby without regard to cash valuation. This is the origin of the benefit test for tax-exempt properties, which must be satisfied for a municipality to assess fees on tax-exempt properties. The proposal outlined in House File 745 and as amended now would still permit municipalities to assess fees on our colleges and universities without fulfilling the benefit test requirement, because the projects and the costs associated with them are based on the benefit to the district, not to the property. Regarding the broad authority that would be issued to a municipality under this bill, the municipality is granted the authority to draw the district however it wants and to distribute the cost of the improvement projects uniformly across each property classification of real estate, which means that the cost does not need to be distributed uniformly across all property holders, just within each given class. So what does this mean for a nonprofit college? Under this bill, a city could draw a district that includes a nonprofit college or university and only residential properties. It could then identify street improvements within the district that under a normal review would not pass the benefits test requirement under the Constitution, and assess up to 100% of the improvement costs on the college if the college's property is classified as something other than residential and it is the only non-residential property located within the improvement district. The proposal included in House File 745 encroaches upon, if not directly violates, the protection for tax-exempt properties outlined in the state's Constitution. Our colleges currently contribute significant resources to municipalities for fees that comply with the benefits test requirement. Our schools provide millions of dollars through these fees. To put this all in perspective, for the fees that our schools currently pay, we need to commit 100% of the tuition revenue based off of our average net tuition from up to 600 students just to pay the fees and assessments that our schools are currently paying. Additional costs added to our institutions require them to either pass the cost on to students through tuition increases or cut expenses that will have a negative impact on the academic and student support offerings our colleges provide, the very thing that is the public benefit for which we were granted our tax-exempt status. And furthermore, yesterday, Chair Pulowski in the Higher Education Committee released his omnibus proposal. With his $150 million budget target, he committed $120 million of that to keep tuition flat at the MnSCU and the University of Minnesota institutions. There is a strong desire within this body to keep tuition under control within higher education. This proposal will force fees on us that we will have no choice but to either raise our tuitions or cut the services that we provide to our students. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Lee Gustafson, followed by Betsy Stolfa and Jill Larson. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Lee Gustafson. I'm an engineering director for the City of Minnetonka. I'm also here representing the City Engineers Association and the Minnesota Public Works Association. On behalf of Minnetonka and these associations, I thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I do have a handout for you today, if I could have.
Great. Our page will distribute it.
Pass that around. And essentially what this handout is, it's a street life, it displays a life of a street if proper maintenance is done to it. And it's being handed out to illustrate that if you do proper maintenance at the right time, you can significantly extend the life of the streets. Maintaining the street is no different than maintaining your house or your roof If you do proper maintenance on it, you're going to significantly extend the life of your house, and roads are no different. Roads are simply one of the largest investments the city has, and proper roadway maintenance saves taxpayer dollars. It is excuse me. The graph there that's being handed out clearly shows that by maintaining your streets at the proper time clearly extends the life. And excuse me, studies have shown, I think it's actually illustrated on the handout, that by spending $1 on maintenance, you'll actually save approximately $7 in repairs. It simply comes down to local road authorities have their proper funding tools to do the right repair at the right time. And for those, sometimes it gets confusing as far as how roads are funded. You can assess road maintenance. You can assess seal coating. You can, and things like this. It's just not practical to do. So for these types of maintenance activities, there's very, very limited funding sources. And this proposed legislation would help cities fund the very nature of extending the life of the street or some of those critical maintenance components. Special assessments does work in many situations, like for reconstruction, but it certainly has its drawbacks. Special assessments clearly add costs to all projects, and you've likely heard that's very difficult to implement by some cities. Some cities have estimated that's approximately $55,000 to $60,000 in costs for each project. These are larger projects, but that $55,000 to $60,000, if you take a couple of projects, that equates to reconstructing one city block. So by especially assessing project after project, year after year, you're essentially spending money on special assessment costs that could really go to pay to reconstruct city streets. And so you're taking money that could be spent on city streets and spending it on meeting your special assessment requirements. Special assessments can delay a project sometimes and could result in higher costs. And one of the most important things we hear about sometimes at a city is that when you specially assess a project, many times you just have a homeowner that's just moved in, or you have a business owner that just moved in. And these special assessment costs can be quite large. And it's very hard for a new homeowner or a new business owner to take on those costs in a very short time period. The proposed legislation will really maximize the maintenance dollar. No money would be wasted in administering special assessment roles if the city decides, if the city decides to go forward with it. As Representative Erhardt mentioned, cities can make that decision. So if they feel that they need to save the money they're currently spending on special assessment, they can apply all those dollars to street maintenance and reconstruction. So it clearly saves the taxpayers dollars in comparison to special assessments. Fees collected within a special street improvement district would be put in a special account that could only be spent within that district. You've heard a couple of comments that you can continue to collect fees year after year after year. That's true, but it does have to meet the qualifications of the plan that's adopted for that district. If no plan is adopted for that district, you can't continue to collect fees. So the City Council has to look at adopting a plan similar to a 5-year capital improvement plan that each city adopts. It has to meet the intent of that plan. The fees would be identified in that plan, or the projects, and the fees would be assessed out accordingly with regards to that improvement plan. Taking care of our streets is important to all of us, and we want to do the right repair at the right time. We want to save taxpayer dollars, and dollar per dollar, the Street Improvement District does provide a funding tool that I think cities could use for a variety of purposes. They would have their own purpose, but I think it allows them the choice to either continue with special assessments if they want, or do a street improvement district, which is actually dollar per dollar more cost efficient. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gustafson. And next we have Betsy Stolfa. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My name is Betsy Stolpa, and I'm a city council person in the city of Delano. We're west of Minneapolis, about 25 miles, and we are originally a railroad town, but we have also had moderate growth over the past decade or so. So we have a real mix of roads. Some of them are over 50 years old, and some of them are quite new. So trying to be a responsible city, we passed a comprehensive street maintenance plan in order to address those problems. As a part of our street comprehensive maintenance plan, we looked at assessments, and as a result of that process, we had 5 public hearings and several community-wide meetings, and it pretty much took up our agendas for the good part of a year in 2010. And in fact, it also took up my time at the grocery store and at the library and walking down the street, because everyone in town wants to talk about how are we going to pay for these streets. What did I hear from these people over the course of all of these public hearings? We talked primarily about either raising the general tax levy through the property tax, and we talked about street assessments. We had a lot of critics on both of those, and the people told us, don't you have another way? Couldn't there be another way? The assessment critics, some of them were elderly people who said, we can't afford a giant wallop of a bill from a street assessment, that we may not even live to see the street, be able to benefit from that street, because, if you're 85, you might not get the life of a street 40 years out of it. Other folks had a problem with the property tax being uneven. Although everyone's driving on the road, everyone has a car with 4 wheels, but if you have a house that's nice or a house that's not nice, you're getting charged a different amount. Same with the businesses. Under a general tax levy, they're paying twice as much as residents. So our people told us, please, can't you find us a way that would be a little bit at a time, rather than a giant wallop of a street assessment? Can't you treat us all similarly? And that was our experience, and we said no. Our hands are tied. We do not have that tool in the toolbox. So what we're asking for in Delano is another tool that we could choose to use if that was the will of our people. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much for coming here. Next we have Jill Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Jill Larson with the Minnesota Business Partnership. I will not repeat what the previous testifiers that were opposed to the bill said, except to say that I agree with them. We also oppose this bill. As was pointed out, we see this as an additional property tax. As you know, business property already pays all local property taxes. We also, unlike most other properties, pay the statewide property tax. Our effective tax rate is 3 times higher than homes. To the previous testimony from the City Council folks, I think their comments, in my opinion, reinforce the reason why we're opposed to this bill. And they're right. Homeowners don't want to pay special assessments. I just lived through it in my own city. It's a huge bill that people don't want to pay, and they want somebody else to pay it. And that's our concern, is that this bill would allow cities to impose this street fee or a tax equally within class rates. And that means business property could theoretically pay 99% of the fee for the entire street improvement or the street maintenance. And that is our concern, that we will end up footing the bill for street improvement that may benefit all properties. And so we think that the existing mechanisms that are in place, whether it be property taxes, TIF, special assessments, special service districts, cities have the ability to create these funds now to maintain their streets. Nobody's against maintaining streets. It's just that we think that there's already mechanisms in place for them to start, socking away this money in order to do the repairs when they're needed. And so we would urge your opposition to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else in the audience who came here to testify with concerns on Representative Erhardt's bill? Members, given the time and the fact that we have looks like 6 people ready to ask questions and start the discussion. And I see just a couple more hands going up now. I think we're going to continue on the committee discussion starting with Representative Anderson when we reconvene at 4 o'clock in room 10. But Representative Erhardt, if you just want to make a concluding comment before we reconvene at 4, that would be appropriate.
Madam Chair, I think that I heard some things that were not quite accurate. I wonder if the folks that were testifying against read this. I understand their concerns that this is the entire business community again saying we don't care about the homeowner and so forth. We just want to keep it away from us. We don't want to do it to somebody else. We don't want to help out. That's about what this boils down from the business community. You heard them. Don't tax us, tax somebody else. My community is redoing its streets from east to west because the east part of the city is 50-plus years old, and the improvements were paid for by special assessments. My district is 600 homes, and they are assessments were anywhere from $12,000 to $22,000, $23,000, and had this been smoothed out over time, it would have been a lot less. So I've lost some of the elderly folks from my district, 600 people. I'm not talking about my political district, I'm talking about my city district. And because they couldn't afford that kind of wrap. And as they move further west in the city, because that's the way it developed from west to east, they have now adopted a different principle, which is somewhat similar to what we're talking about here. They want to spread the cost. There are some districts, Minnetonka, for example, I think spreads. I think they spread over time to get their monies necessary for street repairs. And that's all I got to say for now. I will add one thing. I think that they're forgetting out there that there are a bunch of locally elected people that will be making the decision on this with the same type of forewarning that they give other special assessments and other assessments, and that is they have notice. They have right to testify, and they may, the governing body, the city council, may change their mind in lieu of what they hear at the testimony. They may not, but that's the risk you take when a governing body puts out an edict and listens, and then they don't listen too hard and they get voted out of office. So that's what's going on to the local opportunity here. They are at risk if they should do something that's abnormally wrong, but they should have the opportunity, and they're not mandated to do this by any means. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Erhardt, and members will reconvene at 4 o'clock in room 10. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.